All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of this incredible humidity that won't allow us to paint, and we're going to knock out a couple other tasks. What we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and adjust our ride height, and we're going to install some seat belts. All right, let's talk about ride height. In order to do ride height correctly, you need a few things. First of all, you want the car completely done. Seats in, upholstery, everything complete. Set your tire pressure. We're going to use 22 psi. Ideally, have a half a tank of gas in it, and if you want to get down to the absolute nuts on it, have somebody sitting in the car that weighs about the same as you do. Additionally, you need to do it on a completely flat surface. Okay, book says ride height is 4 1/4 to 4 1/2 on the front, and 4 3/4 to 5 inches on the back. So if you look at some of the guys that are racing, they'll probably lower it down a little bit more than that, but let's just assume we're going to use the book, and I'll use the low end of the book numbers. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to cut some blocks to those dimensions, all right? You got your front blocks, you got your back blocks, and the idea is to get them as close to perfect as you can, because the more accurate you are here, the more accurate you will be there. Next thing you're going to need is a floor jack, because what you're going to do is you're going to jack the car up to get the weight off the spring so you can adjust the spring up and down to set your ride height. The order we're going to do this is we're going to do the front first, then we're going to do the back, then we're going to come back and check the front. If the front is significantly off, when we come back the second time, we will go back to the rear again. Once we're happy with the height on all 4 corners, we set the lock rings and she's good to go. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go around and we're going to loosen the set screw that holds the collar in place on all 4 shocks so that this is easy to spin. Okay, now where your blocks go in the front is you want to get them as far forward on the round tube as possible. Same thing on the back, you want them as far to the rear as possible. Now starting in the front here, you can see the block doesn't go underneath, so that means I'm going to jack it up and I'm going to tighten the spring up a little bit so that block will slip in there. You don't have to jack it up too far, just enough to get the tension off the spring. All right, give it a couple turns, lower it back down. All right. All right, so I went just a little bit too far, so now I'll jack back up and go the opposite direction just a little bit. All right, and you can see that block is snug in there. Just think of the way you gap a spark plug. That's about how much friction you want in there. And like I said, you just watched me do it. It took me, what, 5 or 6 times before I was happy with the height. Now we're going to go do the other side. Same process. All right, once we get the block set on the front and we're happy with that, we move to the rear and we repeat the process. All right, and here you can see the car sitting on the rear block. And once we get this done, we go back to the front and we repeat the process. All right, so once we're happy with the back, like I said, we go back to the front and we just repeat the same process. If the front doesn't have to move more than like 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, then you probably call yourself done there. If you want to double check, you can go back and redo the rear. Now remember, don't leave the blocks on the front while you check the rear, okay? You do them independently of one another. And then when you're done, you should be able to put all 4 blocks in and everything looks good. So that about does it for the blocking. Now let's move on to installing the seat belts. Okay, if you remember one of my previous videos, I've already test fitted the seats. Obviously you saw me drive the car, so the seats were installed. And you can see I have really clean holes here in the carpet and through the quick mat to be able to access the holes for the seats. I'm going to show you how I did that, because what we're going to do is we're going to put another hole right about here where we'll install the lower strap for the seat belt, the 5th strap. Okay, so how do I get these nice neat round holes. Well, the first thing I do is I feel on the carpet to find out where the hole I already drilled for the seat is, and then I take a nail and I push it down through the carpet. That's going to be my mark. Okay? Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little piece of pipe like this, and I'm going to go ahead and sharpen the edges just a little bit. And then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this up, and then I just use my nail as a guide and I press it right over the top, and it'll go through the carpet and through the cool mat, and usually it'll come out still inside the tube, but if not, it'll come out attached to the nail. It'll give me a nice clean hole. Not only is it clean, but you've basically, I guess for lack of a better term, you've cauterized the wound so none of the carpet or the cool mat will fray. So let's go ahead and get that done. We're going to heat this sucker up and get it nice and hot. All right, so once you get that bad boy nice and hot, you line up on your nail. Just push it in, twist it back and forth a little bit. And lift it out. Now I'll be able to reach in there with some pliers. Now it's hot right now, so I'm going to give it a second. But I'll reach in there with some pliers, I'll pull that out, and it'll come out as a solid piece. And there you have it. See, I'm off a little on the hole, as they are some of these other ones, but you get a nice clean hole that way. Okay, I went with Impact brand seatbelts. I've used them in race cars we've used before, and it's really a quality product. I also like the way they connect better with the dial, connect, disconnect, much easier or much cleaner than the clamps that you see on the Simpsons. Although I believe Simpson is the guy that ended up making Impact brand, not sure. But what we really need to talk about is hooking the crotch belt in with the carpet. And I wanted to do it up here on the table where it'd be a little easier to see what we're doing. So the first thing is you got to make sure you install it correctly so that it comes up and it's facing in the right direction when you get it through. So make sure that you got the buckle facing down. And then the next thing you need to be concerned about is if you just bolt this right into the carpet and push it down real hard, you're not going to be able to adjust this strap. And if you can, it's going to be really tough to do so. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put a couple of washers underneath to kind of hold it up so that this remains free here so that you can adjust this strap and get this to the appropriate length. Okay, underneath the car, remember the seat pan that you're bolting this seatbelt into is just tin. So you're going to use a nice big fender washer, and then I'll put another washer over the top of it. So it'll go up against the bottom of the car like this. And of course, I'll put either a locking bolt or blue Loctite on the threads to ensure nothing backs off. We'll use blue Loctite or a locking nut on each one of the seatbelt attaching points. Okay, so here's the final installation. It actually took me three thick washers, to get this stood off enough that this strap moves freely. And remember, you want it to be able to come up like this so that it'll buckle correctly. So make sure this buckle is on the top, and I want to show you the correct way to secure these straps. So, as common sense would dictate, you go over the top and in like that. You adjust it the way you want it. Then you take the tail and you come back over the buckle and back through the back side of the buckle like this, and that's how you lock it down. Okay? That is properly attached. Now on this side here, it's very important. What I had to do is I actually installed the seat to get this angle correct, because I wanted to make sure I had to use a washer behind here to make sure that this strap also moved freely. Otherwise, the strap would pinch against the bracket on the car and it would cause the strap to start to fray and eventually it would tear. Okay, we don't want that. So I went buckle, washer, mounting plate, washer, bolt. All right. And it's important to make sure that this angle makes the strap go straight up to where the entrance to your seat is, or where it's going to line up on your hip correctly. Okay. What you don't want is it to be like this, where the strap is pulling on just one end, because this here will begin to fray and you're compromising your seatbelt. Okay. So make sure you got this straight. Make sure you're able to move the fabric smoothly through the buckle. And that's it. Now I'll show you how to do the one that goes through the tunnel. Okay, step one, we're going to drill a 1/2 inch hole through the tin going into the transmission area. Okay, once that's done, what I'm going to do is, there's a bit of space between the attachment point and the metal for the transmission. I'm going to slip a couple of washers in here just to take that up so I'm not deforming the metal. All right, I hope you can see this. I was able to get 2 washers in between this bracket and the wall here, so that took up a lot of slack. I got the bolt through from the back side. I'm going to put a couple of washers on here, like this. Then the seatbelt to go over that, like this. And then I'm going to install my seat and make sure I have this angle of the belt, correct, just like we talked about before. Then I'll put the nut on it with some blue Loctite, and that'll be it. And I hope you can see that. There it is, all snugged up and set at the appropriate angle. All right, now we're just going to repeat that process on the passenger side, and that'll do it for the seat belts. That'll also do it for this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and when you check in with us next time, you'll see that we've already got the final coat of sealer on the car, and we're preparing it for color paint. So don't forget to join us.